Guys, it's Manga Time once again. I'm here today to bring you my review of Bleach 638, Seething Malice is the Height of Comedy. A rather strange chapter title, but then again it's still a rather strange chapter, albeit just a typical battle chapter at that. However, I did really enjoy this week's chapter. It's really great that the fight between Miuri and Pernida is really starting to heat up. And it actually looks like Miuri might finally be getting pushed around. But basically the chapter starts off with, Pernida saying, that's not my name, left arm name is wrong, name is Pernida. And Miuri's doing his typical talking shit to them, and he's like, oh, what's that, you're going to have to speak up, I can't hear you. And Pernida's like, my name is Pernida Pankajaz. And Miuri's like, that's a mouthful, since I'm the one who discovered you, I get to decide what to call you. And, doesn't make any sense anyway, because technically Yuhava surely discovered Pernida, if anyone did, but whatever. Miuri's like, but however, since the sentient being itself is calling itself Pernida, I'll make an exception, but I get to decide the spelling of your name. So the first 2 pages aren't really anything. It's kind of fillery, but it's just a back and forth in the middle of a fight. This is a typical battle chapter. There's not really any real progression as such. But the artwork luckily is good and the action is good as well. And so therefore it's entertaining. So basically Pernida's like, I don't understand what you're saying. We get some comedy here and there injected by, Ikkaku, Yumichika, and Nemu. But Pernida's kind of twitching as it speaks. It's like, don't understand. Things I don't understand are usually bad. And you enemies, you're saying bad things about the Quincy. And it just flips out, and I don't really know why. The whole little section is a bit confusing, really. I don't understand why Pernida suddenly goes, unforgivable! Especially since Miuri didn't even really say anything that bad, but whatever. I don't know why that happens, but either way, basically Pernida kind of clenches into a fist and starts shooting its nerves out, and they land on the ground, and they start spreading towards Miuri. And I have to say, despite the fact I'm not a huge fan necessarily of the fact that the nerves are all of a sudden visible, it's a cool looking effect. It's a really cool looking effect. The nerves in the ground suddenly lift up, and they basically pull the ground up, and it turns into a huge, stone hand. And I like that, because that addresses the fact that Pernida was able to use its nerves on Hikifune's Cage of Life. So, they don't have to be actual living things to they don't have to be humans, essentially, to have the compulsory used against them. And so, Miuri's like, oh, wow, to think that even inorganic substances can, be penetrated, that's most unexpected, that's fascinating. And there is a lot of cool artwork in this week's chapter. Specifically, the cover page is just crazy, but it looks really good. It's got an ink brush effect, and it's just Miuri's face, but really crazy. And it's the black and white lines are going everywhere. Honestly, it looks amazing. It's really well done, actually. Just a really cool cover page, and I like it when Kubo does cover pages like that, when it's just a character or something. It looks awesome. Anyway, this is a good chapter because I love seeing Miuri get pressured like this. It's very rare that he has to actually actively engage in this kind of physicality. Against Giselle, he kind of just stood back and let the zombies do the work. And against Zale, there wasn't much physicality because Zale wasn't a particularly physical fighter anyway. So, yeah, we haven't really seen Miuri like this since his fight with Uryu, and that's a really good sign. Especially since I said that I thought Miuri would get defeated in this fight, and I still think that holds true. So as the gigantic hand comes crashing into the ground, Miuri manages to jump out of the way, and it's interesting to see he has this level of agility. He then fires his hand out of his arm, so that's a really nice callback to, again, his fight with Uryu when he tried to stop Orihime by sending his arm flying towards her. It's the same thing here, and he uses his arm to grab onto a nearby building. It's kind of funny because he basically just dangles from it. Either way, though, these pages are very dynamic. I love the choreography of this fight so far. And honestly, it's considerably more interesting than I was actually expecting it to be. As Miuri is hanging from this building, the nerves suddenly creep up it. And again, they form a second hand, which breaks away from the building, causing Miuri to kind of... I think it snaps it off forcefully, but I don't actually know. Miuri could have also jumped away. But considering he ends up in a bit of trouble now, I feel like the hands forced him to do it. So basically what happens is he's kind of flying away from this one hand, and as he's doing that, this second hand comes towards him the other side. Again, really nice choreography, and it's honestly awesome to see Miuri struggle like this. Not necessarily struggle, he doesn't struggle until the end, but it's cool seeing him basically tossed to the wolves and having to deal with things without the science. So the hands kind of crush together like that. Before he's killed, in between them, there's an explosion causing the hands to shatter, and Miuri basically reveals that he triggered his armor to detonate so that he would save himself. And as he escapes, we get to see that he's finally left the stupid sunflower clothes, which is just amazing because honestly, they looked ridiculous. I think I've expressed the fact I didn't like them before, but they looked really bad. And I didn't like the fact that they were all white. Therefore, Miuri is literally just a couple of lines, and he never looked very good, in my opinion. And now he looks awesome. He actually looks really cool now, I think. But we get to see him properly again in a second. Basically, he's exploded and now he's flying. He's about to hit the floor. As he's about to hit the floor, however, the nerves appear on the ground, and Yumechika's like, don't land there. His nerves will get you. But Miuri basically flicks a switch on his shoes that activates Hirenkyaku, and we get to see Miuri better now. For some reason, he's wearing like a little kind of cloth around his neck. It looks cool, but I don't know why he's wearing it. I don't know why he was wearing it under his sunflower costume, especially. His head is basically just the black and white stripes, but he's got 3 tufts of his blue hair sticking out. And he also has, if you remember his form before the sunflower, when he had the huge gold headdress, he has what looks like 3 sections of that coming around his head. He looks cool, and I think the reason I like this so much is because he looks like a captain again. He's got the Hiyori on. I like it. I think he looks really awesome, and I presume this is what he's going to look like now until, well, pretty much the end of the series. Although I've probably said that about the sunflower, so it's impossible to say. But Miuri basically is floating there with Hirenkyaku beneath his feet, and a lot of people I've been reading on the forums have an issue with that Miuri is able to do all this stuff, but I really don't see the problem. We know that this is what Miuri is like, and yeah, it can be a little bit annoying, but Hirenkyaku especially is not that surprising to me. At the end of the Arrancar arc, he was able to use a Garganta. It's really not, I don't think it's that surprising that he might have analysed a couple of Quincy, maybe even Uryu himself, and began to be able to use Hirenkyaku. So he's basically like, I can't touch the ground now, so you can't hit me with your nerves, I'm pretty much fine. And rather interestingly, he actually mentions the Ishidas to Pernida. But I also have to say, I love the panel where he says Hirenkyaku, because it's a real nice close-up of his new look, and like I said before, he looks awesome. His hair looks maybe a little bit weird, but overall, anything is better than the sunflower look. So basically, Miuri reveals that Hirenkyaku is the name originally used by Ishida Soken and Ishida Ryuken, although he says Ishida Uryu in the Manga Panda translation. I'm going to go with Ryuken, however, because that makes more sense. And I like that, because that kind of explains why Hirenkyaku is a Japanese word, when the Quincy's primarily use German words. And because then Miuri then says, maybe the other Quincy's had another name for it, but I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, Miuri's basically like, I'm now not going to touch the ground. It doesn't matter if you use your nerves. This is basically over. And what he then does is he basically flings this little lasso thing that wraps itself around Pernida's little finger. And in typical Miuri fashion, the lasso is alive and it starts moaning. I'm thinking that the lasso, the umbrella he had last week, they were all former members of his squad. That really wouldn't surprise me at all. Who nobly sacrificed themselves for the cause. Anyway, basically he detonates the lasso and it blows off Pernida's little finger, and Pernida doesn't like that. Pernida starts screaming like crazy. But Miuri's like, as I told you, I'm going to take a sample of you. He then splashes some preserving liquid on it, and he's like, he lets his guard down momentarily. As I said last week, I think he's going to start doing. I think he's going to get careless. He's going to be. I really think he's going to lose this fight. He splashes some preserving liquid on it, and he's like, oh, well, when I get it back to the lab, I'll stick it in a little test, in a tube, in a chamber, and I'll be able to properly experiment on it. However, as he gets close to the little finger, an eye appears in its freaking knuckle, which is really weird, and it sends its nerves all of a sudden into Miuri's hand, and Miuri's like, oh shit. And basically Miuri's finger goes like that, it snaps backwards, and the rest of it was presumably about to follow. However, then Miuri does something that is frankly impossible to really see. And honestly, that's a rare fault, in my opinion, of Kubo's artwork. All we can really tell is that Miuri's hand starts going like that, and so he grabs it, I think, with his other hand, and then there's like an explosion or something, or it's his arm moving really, really fast. I really can't tell. It's one or the other. But then he reveals that he's got this string, and he's like wrapped the warped armor in it, and there's like blood dripping and everything. So I think his arm has warped. I'm pretty sure it's warped, but what he's done is he's reassembled his nerves so that he's now in control of them. So he's holding the nerve in his hand, so the arm can't be warped any further. That's what I think has happened. It's hard. It's really hard to tell. Either way, the important thing to take away from this is that Miuri is in trouble. He wasn't expecting Pernod to be able to warp his arm, and you can see he's sweating and there's blood dripping from his arm, so he's actually taken damage, which is great, because Miuri... Literally, if you think about it, since Miuri's had 4 fights in the series, I think. Ishida, Zale, Giselle, and then now Pernod. He hasn't taken damage in 2 of those fights. Literally hasn't taken a hit, and that's just the nature of his character. That's the way he fights. He tends to fight not physically, and therefore he can either undo all the damage he does take, or he never takes in the first place. So I really like seeing him in trouble like this and taking hits from Pernod, and once again it only furthers my theory that he probably will lose this fight. But I love the end page, the way he's standing there with his arm looking crazy, but he's also looking worried. You know, there's sweat running down his face. He's got the grin on his mouth, but he's got the creased up nose that implies he's kind of scowling at the same time. And it's the same kind of look he had when he was talking down to Uryu. But yeah, what I think he's done, he says he's rearranged the configuration of his nerves, blood vessels and muscles, and he's holding what looks like maybe it's meant to be a nerve. It's hard to tell. I think as Pernod was warping his arm, like I said, he then rearranged his nerves and pulled the nerves so that he was then in control of the arm. That's what I think probably happened. He then says, you know, did you actually believe that controlling my body would be such a simple task, Pernod? And I think the fact that he calls it by its name is an acknowledgement that maybe this thing is a bit tougher than he thought it was. And although he's still smiling, Miuri is in trouble, and then we get this really ominous shot of Pernod, just like that, obviously missing its little finger now, and then the little finger on the ground close up with its eye, and everything's shadowed, and honestly it's a really, really cool panel, and that's the end of the chapter. Now, I liked this chapter a lot. I thought it was a really good battle chapter. The choreography was great. Seeing Miuri leaping about the place, trying to deal with the 2 stone hands coming down. Honestly, it all looked really great. Using his extendable arm. I liked the throwbacks to the first ever fight he had in Soul Society arc. That was awesome. And like I said, it's really great seeing Miuri getting thrown to the wolves like this. I still firmly believe he will lose this fight. I think my prediction will come true. This fight will end on 640, so 2 chapters to go. However, a lot of people have been disappointed, especially with the end of this week's chapter. The fact that Pernod took such a big hit and Miuri was seemingly fine. But I don't see what the problem is. In my opinion, Kubo has made this chapter, the end of this chapter, look like Miuri is the one in trouble. Although Pernod lost its arm, its finger, it clearly hasn't lost any power over it, and that's what we're supposed to see. You know, Miuri is smiling, but he's sweating. Miuri sweating is not a good thing. Whereas Pernod has been drawn standing there, really ominous looking. All 3 of its eyes just gazing at Miuri. Really doesn't speak to me that Pernod is losing this fight currently. Pernod is winning. Although Miuri took its finger off, Pernod is still causing Miuri to pull out all of his tricks and traps already. And basically Pernod hasn't been hurt. Because although Pernod lost its finger, it's still not lost control over it. And the finger can apparently act independently. So I don't know what people's problem is, to be honest. To me, Kubo drew the chapter in such a way that it looked like Miuri was struggling and losing at the end of this week. Because although both fighters are pretty much okay for the most part, Miuri is the one losing his composure in that he's sweating and he's like, you know, trying to grin to make it look like he's fine. Whereas Pernod is just standing there all ominous and like, you know, doesn't need to say anything. And so yeah, I don't think Miuri is looking like he's winning this fight, to be honest. Very, very happy that he's lost the sunflower clothes. That was honestly a highlight. It was. Still wondering when Ikkaku, Yumichiko, and Nemu are going to get involved. Presumably, I think Miuri will go down, and then they'll all jump in, and then they'll go down, and then maybe someone will save them. I still think Ukitake will save them. But that's about it for this week. It was a simple battle chapter. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. The problem with battle chapters is, like I said, there's never a huge amount of progression, so it was a bit short. But other than that, I really loved it. The artwork was great. The cover page was awesome. And yeah, it was an all-round good chapter. So let me know in the comments below, guys, what do you think of this fight, and what do you think of the chapter? Do you think Miuri looks like he's winning? Because I really don't, personally, but, you know, to each their own, I suppose. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this week's chapter, guys. That'd be really great. But yeah, that's about it, really. Please subscribe. That'd be super awesome, and give me a like. I'd really appreciate it. But until next time, guys, see you later.